Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast. This is episode number 200, landmark episode. We're doing our Week 10 NFL Raw rundown, going through 5 games that we thought were interesting. And if you're new here, we do this every single week. If you enjoy what you're seeing here, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. We're also available on all podcasting platforms. Go leave us a 5-star rating over there. That would really be appreciated. But before we get into all this NFL talk, joining me from Houston, Texas, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael Ween. How you doing, man?
Hello, guys. My name is the Steelers are somehow 6-3, and if you really look
Nice to meet you.
at our names, in the stream, they are both the Steelers are somehow 6-3. So we will roll with that. Hello, everybody. Welcome back after a wild Week 10 in the NFL, and if you want to know how wild it was, 5 of these games finished with a game-winning walk-off field goal in the last seconds, 3 of which we will be talking about today in the Browns-Ravens, Texans-Bengals, and Lions-Chargers. We had some other great stories, including maybe the hottest team in the NFL right now, the Minnesota Vikings with Joshua Dobbs. We'll also be talking about that. And then we'll get into what I thought may have ended up before, going into the week. I thought 49ers-Jags had a chance to be the best game of the weekend. But the 49ers had other things in mind. So hope you guys enjoy. I do not have a prospect of the week prepared. So let's do that at the end of the episode.
Sounds good.
So I have time to think about that. Let's just go ahead and jump right into the games.
All right. Let's start with Browns-Ravens in Baltimore. Earlier this season, the Ravens won 28-3 against the Browns in Cleveland against their backup quarterback, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And this time around, the Browns took down the Ravens 33-31, the team that prior to this week we had, touted as, I think, the number 1 or 2 team in our power rankings, fell to the Browns in a close game. What did you take away from this game?
Well, first of all, the AFC North right now is a league within itself. And if you haven't already looked ahead to Week 11, as I know there's a game going on right now, a pretty important one at that, with the Bills really needing to win this game to not necessarily mathematically knock them out of playoff contention, but it would do a lot of harm if they were to lose to the Broncos tonight. The Broncos, on the other hand, winners of 2 straight, trying to get back into the conversation. If you haven't already looked ahead to Week 11, because you're either watching that game or you're tuning in to us here, the AFC North this week is going to be a battle because we get Ravens-Bengals on Thursday night, and then we get Steelers-Browns on Sunday in the early window. But with all that being said, without looking ahead to those games, I thought the thing that stood out to me, and then I'll bounce it back to you, the Browns fought in this game, period. I mean, sometimes in these divisional matchups, you just got to play a full 60 minutes of football. I know that sounds cliche, but that's what the Browns did. Now, there were long stretches yesterday in Baltimore, and Baltimore has a good defense where Deshaun Watson was simply terrible. He just was. In the first quarter, he was 1 for 9 for 19 yards with a pick 6 and a 0 passer rating, and he finished the first half 6 of 20 for 79 yards and no touchdowns with that pick 6. Yikes. And for most of the game, the Ravens led by 2 scores. I believe they were up by 14 points or more in 4 separate instances in this game, and they lost the game. The reason being, though, is because Deshaun Watson played a really good second half. He finished the second half 14 for 14 for 134 yards and a touchdown. Um, their defense made plays when it mattered the most. It felt like the Browns were the more physical team in the second half. On that last drive, they were running the football and kind of pushing the pile at will to get extra yardage, which I did not necessarily expect. Um, Dustin Hopkins missed an extra point earlier in that game that could have tied it, I believe, but it came down to him. He drilled a 40-yard field goal, and that's a huge win for this Cleveland Browns team that early on in that game with James Prochet's muff punt, 4 defensive penalties that the Browns had on third down that gave the Ravens a new set of downs, and the fact that they were down by 2 scores for most of the game on the road against a red-hot Ravens team kind of felt like it would be too much to overcome for this Cleveland Browns team at one point yesterday, but it wasn't. And you have to give a lot of credit to Kevin Stefanski and Deshaun Watson, for that matter, for fighting. And this defense made a play that really made a difference with that pick six to really, I guess, tie the game at 31 late in the fourth quarter. By Greg Newsome, 34 yards for a touchdown. Like, very impressed by what Cleveland did yesterday. It's hard to come down. It's hard to come back from 2 scores in the NFL against a defense like that, especially on the road, and they did it. So I'll bounce it back to you for your opening thoughts, but those were mine.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the penalties. That to me was how the Ravens moved the ball in the second half. It was because of the Browns' mistakes. The Browns lived in the backfield for the entirety of this game. It felt like um, the Ravens, when they scored, it was on big plays. The Odell Beckham Jr. slant, first possession of the second half, takes it to the house. Keaton Mitchell, undrafted rookie out of East Carolina, I believe, looks like he's got legit juice. They got to get him the ball more. He took one to the house early in the game. But like you said, the Browns kept fighting. 17-6, Ravens had the ball, I believe, driving a little bit. They get that interception at that point in the game, and it was like, okay, this is where the tide kind of turned. And that's probably the point. The biggest point I want to make is the Brown stars just showed up, really mostly in that second half. And David Njoku had like 4 big runs where he broke like 6 tackles, was like carrying defenders down the field. I mean, they brought a different mindset to that second half, clearly, and the Ravens weren't ready for it. And now the question that needs to be asked for the Ravens is, do they have a close games problem? The games that they've won in these past few weeks have been extremely dominant games. Outside of the Bengals game, I believe. I mean, even then, they won that one pretty handedly as well. So the Ravens, I believe, have lost a like a bunch of games from the start of last season to this year now, where they've led a bunch of different times. If you think about the last year, they blew one against the Dolphins. They blew one against, I think they blew one to the Vikings as well, if I remember correctly. But I don't think it's super concerning. I think that's something that's going to have to be addressed, though. They just got to keep their focus in these second halves and keep their foot on the gas.
Well, they're letting games slip away that honestly shouldn't slip away.
Yeah.
And the worst part about it is earlier this year, they controlled a game on the road in Pittsburgh but it was self-inflicted mistakes and just poor situational football that let the Steelers hang around, and they ended up losing that game. They didn't make the necessary plays in the second half, where that's a focus issue. I'm sure that plays a part of it. An execution issue, a coaching issue. I'm sure it all kind of comes together to make for what has been a problem with the Ravens the past couple of years. But going back to my original point, you've now had chances to win 2 games in division to really put a chokehold on where things stand in your division.
Yep.
And you've ended up losing 2 separate ways. You're now the 3rd team in NFL history to lose a game despite holding 4 separate leads of 14 plus points in a game. And you're the first to do that in nearly 20 years. The last team to do it was the Seattle Seahawks when they lost to, coincidentally, the Baltimore Ravens back in week 12 of the 2003 season. Probably games we were too young to remember. And the Giants did it back in 1966, way back when, against, guess what, the Cleveland Browns. So it is an issue. It kind of reminds me of a little bit the Texas Longhorns, what they're dealing with right now, but they're 2 totally separate things. I mean, college football is a much different game than the NFL. But yeah, I mean, it's something that needs to be addressed. You can't keep letting these games slip away, especially with a defense that's statistically elite. But look, if you would have told me that this is all you need to know, I believe they call this a padlock or bad luck stat on the late kick show with Josh Pate. If you would have told me that Deshaun Watson goes into Baltimore on Sunday and in the first half goes 6 for 20 for 79 yards and throws a pick 6, I tell you the Ravens win the game. But
That is true, but he was using his legs a lot, though. I think, to his credit, he wasn't throwing the ball well at all, and you're right, but he did get a few third downs with his legs, and that played really big part in them winning this game.
yes, but I'm saying if that's all I knew,
Yeah,
I
I
didn't
got
know
it.
about any of the other stuff. I tell you everyone tells you Ravens probably have the advantage, but it's a 60-minute football game and not a 30-minute football game. And quite simply, that's kind of been sometimes the Baltimore Ravens issue. So now, before we move on to the next game, we stand here in the AFC North. The Ravens sit at 7-3, but the Steelers and Browns are just a half game back at 6-3. Now, those 2 teams play each other this week in Cleveland. Baltimore plays Cincinnati, who's still lurking at 5-4, but kind of got a gut punch this weekend when they played Houston. So let's move on to our next game, the 49ers and the Jaguars. I'll let you start on this one.
Yeah, this was a beat down from the start. This one really, I think, says more about the 49ers than it does the Jaguars. I think the Jaguars they just flat out got punched in the mouth a little bit. And the 49ers, to their credit, came out pissed off. They got Debo back, which is a big deal. I think that's one of the key takeaways this week is how important Debo is to that offense and making it work. But on top of everything else, they just came out with better energy and they just took it into their own hands right from the beginning, right from the get-go. And then defensively, I think there was just a lot of little, kinks here and there, little adjustments that just made a huge difference. Like they went to a lot of 5-man fronts and just basically said, "The hell with coverage. We're just gonna attack you at the line of scrimmage, and you're not gonna have enough time to throw." And that's basically what happened. Trevor Lawrence, with those little adjustments plus this, like the little disguises they had in coverage, he never looked comfortable. Like not once in this entire game did he look comfortable. And that's credit to that 49ers defense. And the other side of things, Brock Purdy looked great. The offense looked right back to where they were, the first 5 weeks of the season. So, I mean, to anyone who was ready to write off the 49ers, time to park that bus a little bit. This 49ers team is still going to be right there in January, possibly in February.
Yeah, whoever was writing off the 49ers, I'll just leave that up to you. Okay, remember that 3-game losing streak that the Niners had? Yeah, that's history now. They got healthy. They got Deebo Samuel back. They got Trent Williams back, and this is what it looks like. Now, are they going to beat every single team by what was the final score of this one?
31 points, 34-3.
34-3. Yeah, 31 points. No, they're not. Especially teams, playoff caliber teams like the Jacksonville Jaguars. But a couple things. Number one, you don't want to play Kyle Shanahan coming off a bye week. You don't want to play a fully healthy 49ers team that's had a chance to rest in a full week to prepare, although the Jaguars were actually coming off a bye as well. So, in this situation, it's kind of a even rest situation. But playing Kyle Shanahan off a bye is not something you want to do. The Jaguars came into this game winners of 5 straight. They had climbed to the top of the AFC South. 5-0 in their last 5 games. But San Francisco silenced all the concerns that we had about them before the bye week. Number one, Brock Purdy was sharp. He threw for 296 yards and 3 touchdowns in 3 quarters of work. So we got the fourth quarter to rest because this was not a game no longer at that point. Deebo Samuel came back and was impactful. He scored a touchdown. And the 49ers defense got back to what they do best. You mentioned it. Trevor Lawrence was under duress the entire game, whether it was Eric Armstead, whether it was Javon Hargrave up the middle, Nick Bosa, who had 1.5 sacks, Chase Young, who created some quarterback pressures. It was everybody. It was a collective effort up front. They dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, and they got to Trevor Lawrence 5 times. One thing about the Jaguars' 5-game winning streak, and this is kind of my last point, in that 5-game winning streak, they actually turned the ball over 8 times. The thing was, their defense created 12 turnovers during that span. So while they were maybe giving the ball away a little too much, they were getting the ball back in abundance. This game, he threw 2 interceptions and he lost a fumble. And when you're minus 3? Yeah, minus 3 in the turnover differential against a talented team like San Francisco, they take advantage of those mistakes. So San Francisco, as healthy, a healthy San Francisco team, can't talk today, is a bona fide Super Bowl contender. They are a top 3 level team in the National Football League, and you might see that reflected in our power rankings later this week. As far as the Jaguars are concerned, it's just kind of the same thing, I guess you can say. They need to stop turning the ball over. And we still wonder what Trevor Lawrence are we going to get? Are we going to get the same Trevor Lawrence Sunday to Sunday to Sunday to Sunday? Are we going to get a consistent Trevor Lawrence over and over and over again to the point that can elevate this Jaguars team beyond just maybe winning a playoff game, getting to the AFC Championship game, and maybe even contending to get to the Super Bowl? So those are my thoughts. But bottom line is the 49ers came out of their bye week. They came out healthy, and this was the type of dominant performance that we had grown accustomed to through the first month, 5 weeks of the season. And so far, when they've been fully healthy this year, they have arguably looked like the best and or second best team in the National Football League. So we'll we'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I don't think I have anything else for that game.
Nope.
Let's move on to Texans at Bengals, where I would argue was probably the game of the year so far. That finish, last 5 minutes or so was
Yeah.
complete chaos. I mean, just insanity. But I'll go first for this game. I think the Texans, they went into the half up 10-7, and if you told me that before the game, you'd be like, oh, I mean, okay, that's solid. But in reality, they were moving the ball up and down the field on this Bengals defense all game long. They had a fumble in the red zone on 4th and 1 in the first half, and then I believe a different fumble later on as well, and it ended up being 10-7 when it should have been, 17-7, possibly 20-7 or something like that. So you went to the half, you're like, wow, we left all these points on the board. We're playing this elite Bengals team. Now you're thinking like, oh, this is probably where the Bengals are gonna take advantage. But no, I mean, it just continued. Every single third down, I mean, it was just like clockwork. The Texans were getting whatever they wanted in the passing game without Nico Collins as well. It was Tank Dell. Um, it was Noah Brown, former Cowboy, um, and they just got whatever they wanted. The one other thing I wanted to mention for the Texans offense is, I mean, this was the first game where they got the running game going, and I think that helped their pass protection. I think that helped them stay on schedule. And if they're going to run the football like that, then this offense is probably a top 5 offense, if I'm being entirely honest. With CJ Stroud playing like this, with the weapons that they have established now, that's how it feels to me. They had like 550 yards of total offense on Sunday. I mean, it was a absolute clinic. Last thing I wanted to mention: Laramie Tunsil versus Trey Hendrickson was a matchup to watch before the game, and Laramie Tunsil played a fantastic game. That entire Texans offensive line played a fantastic game. The Bengals didn't really get much pressure at all. And CJ Stroud was just back there picking them apart.
Here's a question for you before I get into my thoughts, which will build off of your thoughts. Is CJ Stroud, in your mind, in the MVP conversation right now?
Um, I think he's outside of like the inner circle, so to speak. But I think there's a conversation to be had. Absolutely, I think.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I am at this point. I think he's maybe on the outskirts of, like, his name deserves to at least be brought up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The way that he's performed and getting these type of wins only help your case. So just wanted to put that out there. But a couple things to build off your point, and then we can move on. You mentioned the running game. This was a masterclass on the ground. The Texans offense has struggled to gain traction on the ground so far this year, but it was Devin Singletary who was the workhorse yesterday. Good vision, burst to the edge, 150 yards on 30 carries. And that's the thing you want to see, a commitment to the running game. That number right there, 30 carries, is what I think is most important. Another thing that was important is they avoided negative runs that set them behind the chains. They were able to get push at the line of scrimmage against a really good Bengals defensive front, and they were gobbling up yards on the ground, helping their young quarterback. They went into Cincinnati against a good defense, a really good defensive coordinator, dropped 544 total yards of offense while averaging 7.5 yards per play. And they outgained the Bengals by 164 yards in the win. So now it was a close game. And the reason it was a close game is because of some of the mistakes that the Texans made, and just because Joe Burrow is also pretty damn fucking good. His explosive playability got the Bengals back into the game. He threw a 64-yard touchdown pass to Jamar Chase to cut the deficit to 3 points late in the third quarter. And then, he completed a 64-yarder catch and run sort of deal to Tyler Boyd at the 2-minute warning. And since he had a chance to take the lead late, but Boyd dropped a wide open, what would have been a go-ahead touchdown pass to take the lead.
Would have forced the Texans to score a touchdown as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that ended up shutting down that Bengals drive. It ends up, being a tie game. And then you leave CJ Stroud, what was it? 119 seconds on the clock with one timeout. And he just continues his stellar rookie campaign. The savvy pocket movements, the immaculate accuracy, whatever you want to say about him. And the thing I want to bring up is how good CJ Stroud, a rookie quarterback for that matter, has been this year when throwing the football down the field. And by down the field, I mean 20 or more air yards. When CJ Stroud this year has thrown the ball 20 or more yards downfield, he's got a 147.5 passer rating, which leads the National Football League. He's got 6 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, which is the highest ratio in the NFL. He's thrown for 665 yards, which also leads the NFL. And he's got a 64.5% completion percentage on those kinds of throws, which also leads the NFL. And we can go 10 plus yards, 15 plus yards, 20 plus yards, as far as you want to go. And CJ Stroud is elite throwing the football down the field. And it's unbelievable for a rookie quarterback like himself playing on the road in Cincinnati. And he wasn't perfect. He was really damn good, and he made the plays when it mattered the most. That's all that matters. But he fumbled twice in scoring range early. And he threw that pick, I believe it was in the fourth quarter, that also kind of let the Bengals stay close in that game. So, but whether it was Dalton Schultz, Noah Brown, Tank Dell, I mean, the list goes on and on of guys stepping up for this Texans team. If they get that kind of running game and, have this kind of quarterback play where you can make the argument that they at least have a quarterback that has maybe tossed his hat into the MVP discussion pile, they're going to win a lot of games and they might make the playoffs. Like, I'm starting to think that with this kind of quarterback play, this Texans team I haven't looked at their schedule, but sitting at 5-4, what are they? Now a half game back, full game back of the Jacksonville Jaguars at 6-3.
Yeah, with the win against them as well on the road.
Against them on the road. Boy, they get to play the Cardinals. They get to play the Cardinals this upcoming week. Now the Cardinals have Kyler back, so that's not a total just walkover game as of right now. But you get them at home, and you have CJ Stroud playing like this. This Texans thing could really take off.
Oh yeah,
they have the right head coach and the right quarterback.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yep.
Last thing, um, this Bobby Slowick guy, the Texans offensive coordinator. Remember that name because he's a head coaching candidate right now. Like, um, people maybe thought coming into the season, oh, this is probably a guy that's going to be a head coaching candidate and within the next 3 or 4 years. No, he's a head coaching candidate right now, and the with the play calling masterclass that he put on against the Bengals defense. I mean, good luck Texans in terms of keeping him long term. But
Yeah, Stroud through 9 games of his career. He's passed for 2,626 yards, third most by a rookie over that span, trailing only Justin Herbert in his 2020 rookie year and Andrew Luck way back when in 2012. So let's move on to Lions Chargers. This was our last game, along with Texans Bengals and Browns Ravens, that we will talk about today. That was decided by a game-winning field goal late. The Lions winning it 41-38 at the end to go to 7-2 on the season. What'd you learn in this game?
well, I learned that when the Lions have a completely healthy offensive line, I mean, this team is going to be tough to beat. Simple as that. Because they're going to put up points on anybody and everybody. And the Chargers haven't exactly been a a good defense this year. But at the same time, I mean, Jared Goff was able to sit back there against a defensive line with Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack with not just time to throw, but legitimately like 3 to 5 yards of room around him every single drop back. And you add on top of that the two-headed monster at running back with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. This is legit now. Jameson Williams looked good today as well, or not today, yesterday. Um, yeah, this Lions offense, it's rolling now. Now defensively, I think with some of the zones that they run against a quarterback with a strong arm that knows how to manipulate defenses like Justin Herbert, that's where you have a little bit of concern. But if their offense is going to play like that, it's going to be a tough game against the Lions, regardless. So, like, if you're going to ask me, can this team win 3 playoff games? Sure. Like, it's within the question.
Will they need to win 3 playoff games? They're not right now. They're not mathematically out of it for the number 1 seed in the NFC. I don't think that they'll end up getting there, but I look at their schedule and I see a world where they could get to 12, 13 wins, and we'll see where
Yeah.
they go from there. The Chargers came into this game tied for the league's 6th best run defense statistically. 89.8 yards per game coming into Sunday. But as you mentioned, and maybe this is more of a credit to the Lions more so than anything, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery just pounded them all day long. Those two combined for 177 yards and 3 touchdowns in the first half.
Yeah.
177 yards and 3 touchdowns in the first half. Their most rushing yards in a half in the last 30 years. It was also the most rushing yards and touchdowns that the Chargers, of course, had given up all season in one half. So credit to the Lions for running the football. This was a back and forth game. The Lions put up 533 yards of offense. They obviously ran the football effectively. This Chargers defense surrendered many big plays, but also on the other side, I mean, the Chargers had big plays as well. It just came down to ultimately Um, the Lions were aggressive on fourth down from the jump. They converted 2 attempts in the first quarter, and they kept that mindset throughout the game. Loved the way Dan Campbell coaches. I mean, I don't know how you cannot. They kept that mindset throughout the game, and the game really came down to a final fourth down conversion that helped really salt the game away, facing 4th and 2 from the Chargers' 26-yard line with less than 2 minutes remaining. Dan Campbell could have just said, okay, we're going to kick the field goal here, and we're going to try to win this game with our defense. But he went for it in that situation, and they got it. It was a completion to Sam Laporta for 6 yards. They got the first down. They ran down the clock, and they kicked the game-winning field goal. The Lions were 4 of 5 on fourth down attempts yesterday, and their aggressive approach paid off in the end. So that was what stood out to me. It's a somewhat killer loss for the Chargers. They now drop to 4 and 5 on the season.
Yep.
I haven't looked at their schedule, but it looks like Staley took a good portion of the blame in his post-game presser for the 41 points allowed in the loss. So we'll see where that situation ends up. But yeah, credit to the Lions more so than anything, I think.
Yeah. And when you look at the Chargers defense and all the talent on it, and you look across the way to a team like the Texans, who are, I mean, even though they're 5 and 4, they're a rebuilding team regardless. And they're still going out there and playing good defense week in and week out. And I think Brandon Staley has this cookie cutter cover 4 system that maybe doesn't fit the players that well. I would say, and I don't like the system in general. Regardless, I've said that on the show before. Like the cover 4 shell defense is it's dying in the NFL for a reason. But regardless, I'm just Brandon Staley is just counting his days at this point. I'm not, praying on his downfall or anything, but Chargers just tick me off. I'm sorry.
The thing is, let's do an exercise real fast. How many teams right now in the AFC have 5 wins? Because right now the Chargers sit at 4 wins. So how many teams in the AFC right now currently have 5 or more wins? Let's count them real fast. Dolphins, right?
Yep. Dolphins, Texans.
The Bills have 5 wins. They might have 6. I don't know what's going on in that game right now. Every single team in the AFC North.
Yep.
Texans,
Jags.
Raiders. The Raiders have 5 wins right now.
They do?
Yes, man. They're 2-0 with Antonio Pierce. That deserves to be mentioned. It feels like there's a totally different vibe with that Raiders team since
he kind of has a Dan Campbell feel to him.
Since coincidentally they fired Josh McDaniels and their general manager. Now those games are never pretty, but they're 5 and 5, and something is to be said for that. Who are we missing? So we got the Bills, the Dolphins, every AFC North team, that's 6. The Texans, that's 7. The Jaguars, that's 8.
The Colts have 5 wins.
Colts, that's 9.
AFC
North, AFC East, AFC South, AFC.
I think that's everybody.
Chiefs.
Oh my gosh, how do we forget the Chiefs?
Chiefs and Raiders. Teams? Chiefs, Raiders. I think that's 11 teams.
Wow.
11 teams in the AFC have 5 or more wins, and you're the Chargers right now, and you have 4. So
they got a lot to figure out. And they got to jump a lot of teams.
Yes, and it's not, you know, the good thing about this is it wasn't against an AFC common opponent, but it's still a game you could have won. This has been, I believe they mentioned on the broadcast, it was Tony Romo or Jim Nance. Like, this is their 100th one possession game in the last 10 years. And I don't know the exact record, but I'm sure they've lost the bulk majority of those games.
Yeah.
And it's just killer for any
Ugh.
Chargers fans out there. But we could talk about the Chargers and
Yeah.
we could do a whole case study on the Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah, but the last thing I'll say is the players still play for Brandon Staley. At least they're putting in effort clearly, and they still like the guy. It's not like a Raiders situation where they just hate
No,
Josh McDaniels' guts or anything. So
that's
I guess
good.
that's a positive.
It is. Okay. Well, last game of the day, Saints and Vikings. I'll give you my quick thoughts. Give credit to the Vikings defense and what they did yesterday. Um, I went back and watched some of this game because, quite frankly, I was tuned in to some other games, and I didn't actually watch much of this game other than when it came on the Red Zone channel. Um, what Brian Flores has done with this defense, I think, is something that needs to be mentioned. They created waves of pressure on this Saints offense early on, and they kept this Saints offense on its heels. And they silenced this New Orleans offense late when it started to get some things going. 12 Vikings defenders yesterday, 12 generated at least one pressure on Sunday, according to Next Gen Stats. And they were led by the one, the only, Daniil Hunter, who created 7 pressures. Daniil Hunter and almost everyone else on that Vikings defense at some point yesterday lived in the Saints backfield. Hunter earned a sack and 3 quarterback hits on 7 pressures. Minnesota forced 5 3-and-outs. And this, most importantly, they held the Saints to 4 of 14 on third down. They were getting off the field. They were generating pressure. They were setting this Saints offense behind the chains. And they iced the game with back-to-back interceptions after, the offense sputtered a little bit. For a Saints perspective, I thought the story was really Jameis Winston coming in after Derek Carr's injury and providing a little bit of a spark. Carr exited the game midway through the third quarter with a right shoulder injury / concussion, according to NFL.com. And, Jameis Winston came in, provided some excitement. He made several big plays. He had a touchdown pass to Chris Olave, a touchdown pass in the right corner of the end zone to A.T. Perry, where they kind of wrestled for it, the defensive back.
Yeah, and a quintessential Jameis throw as well.
Yeah. That was it, if you had ever seen one. Look, Winston's probably not going to be the answer that cures what ails New Orleans. But there was no doubt yesterday that when he came in, he did inject some life into their offense. And the good thing with Jameis is you kind of know what you're going to get. You're going to get some wow, and you're also going to get some what the fuck was that?
Yeah, exactly. And they need some of that. They need some energy, some life.
They do, and that's why I bring it up. So,
Yeah.
what were your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think this sums up the Derek Carr part of the game and the Jameis Winston part of the game. With Derek Carr in the game, Chris Olave had 1 target. That entire first 3-ish quarters of the game, something like that. And then Jameis went into the game, and the dude lets it rip when he has man-to-man coverage and a matchup he likes. Like, at the end of the day, that's what the Saints need. And they have the weapons to be able to do that, and they need a quarterback that's just going to let it rip and not just check the ball down or take a sack. That's really all it comes down to me. And then really the story of the game, of course, Josh Dobbs, man. I mean, wow, like the athleticism needed to just kind of wing it, like not really knowing the offense on a advanced level quite yet. It kind of looks like a more advanced version of Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M almost. Like he's kind of running around back there, chucking it around. If he sees an open receiver, he'll hit him. But it's not. He's not really like able to see the field that well because I don't even think he knows the routes that are being run half the time. Like I think Kevin O'Connell is still having to tell him in his helmet, like as he's calling in the play, which is just insanity. I mean, you mentioned the defense. The defense played great, but I think it's also you know the Saints offense with Derek Carr. I think there's questions to be had there in terms of whether Derek Carr was really worth that contract. As much as I am a Derek Carr guy, when he plays well, he hasn't been playing well. So
No, he is not.
yeah, and then man, I mean, I think you can make the argument that Brian Flores is probably in terms of a sure thing head coach, probably a top head coaching candidate, in my opinion. I don't know if the NFL is ready to do all that in terms of hiring a guy as head coach that sued the league, but I think, him as a coach, you know what you're going to get. He's going to blitz a lot. He's going to challenge you. He's going to make you feel the defense. You're going to feel their presence, regardless of how many points you put on them.
Yeah, and there are going to be some openings.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. I think it's quite possibly going to be an opening in Washington. Now, would Washington want to go the defensive route again? I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
There could be an opening in Los Angeles with the Chargers, but I don't know again what route they want to go with that. We'll eventually later on in the season go through this exercise, but yeah, I mean that's something I didn't mention is Josh Dobbs. He's a guy that I root for because I
How
just
can you
like
not? Yeah.
I like his story, and
Yeah.
they call him the Pastronaut because of his background in what is it, aerospace
Yeah.
engineering.
Engineering, all that type of stuff.
Yeah. Look, I mean, whether he knows the offense or not, or to what extent, he was giving the Saints defense all kinds of problems yesterday.
Yeah.
He was avoiding sacks with movement in the pocket, miraculous spin moves, slipping out of tackles left and right. Uh, and he used his legs at times, which he's totally capable of. 44 yards and a touchdown on 8 runs, but he keeps his eyes downfield like a veteran quarterback. Finds targets when the pocket breaks down, and he diced up that Saints defense to the point where they built a 24-3 halftime lead. He had a pinpoint touchdown pass to TJ Hawkinson late in the second quarter. And Minnesota put up points on 5 of its first 7 possessions yesterday. And their defense, things bogged down late a little bit for their offense with 3 consecutive 3-and-outs, keeping New Orleans alive kind of in that game. But ultimately, I think what the past 2 weeks prove is Josh Dobbs going out and getting him at the trade deadline after you lose your franchise quarterback for the season, quite possibly forever, as we don't know what the future of Kirk Cousins holds, where he'll be maybe playing next year. I think what this proves to me is with this defense and the way that this defense is playing, and you even mentioned it, credit to you, way back when this run kind of was starting for the Vikings when they had Kirk Cousins healthy. Now on a 5-game winning streak with Josh Dobbs, who smart guy, makes the right reads, has avoided, at least to this point, the big negative plays that put you in disadvantageous situations. The Vikings aren't going away in the NFC. They're going to be a playoff team, I think. They might not win the division with the Lions right there, but they're going to be a playoff team. And this is the kind of team that you might not want to see in a wild card game in January if they continue to play like this. I think what this proves is Josh Dobbs he's a capable guy who will guide you to the playoffs and could, if you fuck around, you'll find out.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much, man. I mean, that's really that's really the only way to put it, man. But yeah, I guess that's it for that game. I guess, was there anything that you missed from your notes, I guess, before we get into raw prospect of the week, just from any of these games that you wanted to add or mention?
I guess the only other game that kind of would need to be mentioned is the Seahawks game. Look, once again, I felt like it was kind of this was a Seahawks game. Geno Smith came through once again late with the touchdown pass to Tyler Lockett for the go-ahead score, the front right pylon. When Smith is dialed in, it's super fun to watch. But when it's not going well, it's a whole nother story. And credit to Sam Howell. He gave his team a chance to win. He had the strike over the middle to Brown that seemed to shock everyone at Lumen Field and tie the game. But then, Smith answers right back. I just thought it was a really entertaining game to watch.
Yeah.
It didn't start all that entertaining, though.
So, it was a field goal fest to start.
Yeah. So I thought I would mention that. The Seahawks get the win, an important win at that to keep themselves in this NFC West, even, I guess, with this NFC West, in this NFC West race. And I can't wait to see a Seahawks-Niners game. I'm not sure when that occurs, but
yeah,
that'll be fun. This week, though, before we get into prospect of the week, I believe we start week 11 with hold on a second, with Ravens Bengals.
Yep.
And we end week 11 with Eagles Chiefs on Monday Night Football, a week from tonight.
Whew. Yeah, that's going to be amazing. One thing I did want to mention from my notes that I missed earlier was the Browns are first in the NFL in time of possession, and I thought that's an interesting thing, little nugget there, especially with the fact that they have this great defense. You want to play ball control and keep them fresh. So last 5 minutes of that game, they got the ball with 5 minutes and 4 seconds left, ran the clock all the way down, got the game-winning field goal. So, I still don't know how to feel about them in terms of their quarterback situation, but they're going to be a tough team to beat regardless in any scenario. So let's get into raw prospect of the week.
Want me to go first?
Yeah, go right ahead, man.
Okay, this is easy for me. Jaden Daniels, quarterback, LSU. Jaden Daniels right now leads the NCAA in total yards, yards per play, quarterback rating, passing touchdowns, rushing yards by a quarterback. He also leads by a wide margin in most plays of 20 or more yards in 2023. He's got 76 plays of 20 or more yards this year. The next closest is Michael Penix Jr. with 57. The guy is just ridiculous. And he's about as fun to watch as you can get. And his defense is quite suspect, terrible at times, but he took it upon himself to put up over 700 yards of offense in Gainesville on Saturday. He's the first player in FBS history to record 350 passing yards and 200 or more rushing yards in a single game. The guy's setting records, and if I had to vote right now, I'm voting Jaden Daniels for the Heisman, even though LSU has 3 losses.
Hard to argue with that. I mean, he's playing unbelievable football, and he's doing all of that passing and at an elite level, and also sometimes you forget about the running ability as well. I mean, it's truly top tier, and it's going to be interesting to see how the NFL views him once he enters the draft.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I do not think. Well, I actually don't know what's going to happen with the Heisman. I think typically it goes to the best available player on the best team, which right now I think would be probably Michael Penix Jr. since they are undefeated. But where would this Ellis? I mean, I don't know. Go ahead and get into your raw prospect of the week so we can wrap this thing up.
Yeah, we can get into some Heisman talk on Dit Hole pretty soon, but my prospect of the week was Tank Dell, wide receiver out of University of Houston, now plays for the Houston Texans, and he went in the 3rd round, but this is a guy who had 18 touchdowns in his final season in college. The short area quickness and athleticism, I mean, you see it in the red zone, you see it all over the field, really. And the question for him coming out was never, oh, can this guy get open? It's just been, he's 160 something pounds. Is he going to hold up in the NFL? And the answer is yes. I mean, he took a shot, I think, early on in that Bengals game where he was coming over the middle and just got rocked. He got right back up though, and I think he's going to be in Houston for a long time. I think the pairing of him and Nico Collins is fantastic. Just like a big physical, jump ball threat paired with just insanely quick, small dude, I guess, if you're going to put it in as simple terms as possible. But yeah, he's been putting up crazy numbers in wake of this, CJ Stroud stretch. And the pairing of him and Stroud is going to be around for a long time.
Yep. Nothing really to say about that. I mean, I think you're spot on with that one. Okay, well, that wraps it up right around an hour for our Week 10 edition of the Raw Rundown. One last thing I had on Jaden Daniels. As you know, I'm perusing the X world or Twitter or whatever the fuck they call it nowadays. Top 3 Heisman candidates. Zach Nagy has this tweet out. Oregon's quarterback Bo Nix, 3,256 total yards, 34 touchdowns against the 53rd ranked strength of schedule. Washington quarterbacks Michael Penix Jr., 3,533 total yards, 30 total touchdowns against the 43rd ranked strength of schedule. LSU's quarterback Jaden Daniels, 4,082 total yards, 38 touchdowns against the 4th ranked strength of schedule.
It speaks for itself. I mean, and if you were going to go, remove the names, player A, player B, player C, it's player C every single time in that scenario as well.
Okay, guys. So we're going to get a 45-minute in and out episode of Dit Holin starting here in about 20 minutes. So come right back. to get some Texas Longhorns football talk and some more talk within the state of Texas pertaining to those Texas A&M Aggies. As arguably the biggest news of the weekend was the firing of one Jimbo Fisher. So we're going to talk about the magnitude of the A&M job, the candidates, some Texas news that has arise over the weekend. I'm not even sure Emmy is aware of it at this point, but he might be. We'll find out. Talk about the Jonathan Brooks injury, what that means for Texas. Come back here in about 20 minutes for the 31st episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. But thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate you. And just like the Ravens' chances of holding on to 4 separate 14-point leads, and just like Tennessee's chances on Saturday of keeping it close with Missouri, we are going, gone. Peace out.
Peace.